You have it here.
Very good. Everyone can follow along most of that session. So if you want to do that, please register yourself at Eccenca.my and request a sandbox, personal sandbox. Make sure it starts with KGC minus, and then my initials name, my firewall, I'll just mark. That's it. Yeah.
All right. Audio is working now?
They make you work really hard for it.
Good. 11. I think it's people still coming. Maybe we wait 1 more minute.
We're live online, just so you know.
By the way, the online screen that is shown is the one that we see here on the wall. The screen shown online is the one that we see on the wall?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I think it's 2 minutes past, so let's get started. Yeah, welcome to this masterclass, and yeah, happy to have that room full of knowledge graph enthusiasts in front of me. My name is René Pietzsch. I'm heading product management in Eccenca since a while. And what I brought with me today is basically the thing that we released just for this KGC, our new free sandbox offering of our product. Eccenca is a German-based software vendor. So we specialize in tools to build knowledge graphs, to manage knowledge graphs, and to build knowledge graph-based applications. So this masterclass is intended to give you some of the ideas what Eccenca Corporate Memory is about, right? So why we think this tool is worthwhile to be released into a more broader public with the free sandbox offering that we are showcasing. But yeah, more into details during this masterclass. So I think I'll not go too much into the agenda here. First things first. So it's important, if you want to follow along, it's very important to register your personal sandbox now, so that once a couple of slides that I have with me are shown, you can actually follow along on your very own instance and build a knowledge graph. Build a knowledge graph yourself. Yeah, let's get to that actually. To do this, to set up an instance, go just to Eccenca, eccenca.my, eccenca.my. Register for a personal account. So you need to register with a real email address. The confirmation code is sent to this, or confirmation ask is sent to this email address. Once confirmation is done, you can actually log in and register your personal instance. When requesting a sandbox, the only other thing that you need to make sure is that you choose an instance name that starts with KGC minus and then some other thing that you can freely choose. My own instance just uses my initials, so it's named KGC minus RP, and off you go. So just give everyone a chance to follow on. So if
how long will this be available, this sandbox, or is there some limitation?
Good question. So the sandbox, if you take the time to read through all the terms and conditions, you will know, I tell you, because we don't have the time now. Initially, the sandboxes will be made available for 30 days, right? There will be reminder emails sent out to you, so you can actually then contact our support staff and ask for prolongation, or even afterwards, you can download your data and everything that you put into that instance and start with a new one after it has been terminated. So yeah, for everyone that arrived, this masterclass is, the idea of this masterclass is to be something like a tutorial, if you will, and to encouraging you to follow along with what I'm showing to you. In order to follow along, it's important that you set up an instance yourself, going to eccenca.my, setting up an account, and then registering your personal sandbox as described on that slide. Okay, while you guys doing this, just to complete that very brief agenda.
Just a minute.
Yeah, sure. I think you have it on every slide. So go to eccenca.my and make sure that the name of your instance starts with KGC minus and then some freely chosen slug in the end. Just a very brief agenda. So important to start your engines, gentlemen, right? So register the sandbox, please. And then we will start off with a functional overview, why you actually should care about corporate memory and why you should consider this as part of your standard tool chain. Completed with a brief system architecture overview. And then we get into it. We will building a enterprise knowledge graph in the time we have during this masterclass. And we will conclude with a short outlook on what's next, because in this 90 minutes, we definitely cannot look at each and every feature of this rich package of software. But yeah, I give you some ideas what other steps could follow after that. So as this step is important, I'll just pause you for another minute. Just give me an indication if you already registered or requested your instance.
Yeah.
Can you just raise your hand once you're done with that step already? So we have 1, 2. Okay. So
A quick question. Not everyone is actually doing it, so.
that is the question, right? So if the ones not raising their arms, if you don't want to follow along, that is perfectly fine. I don't want to miss out on those that actually want to take their chances. So, okay, perfect. Yeah, that's fine.
Mine says it's online, but if I click into it, it asks me to put in the corporate memory, the email and password, and then it doesn't recognize my email and password. Unless I'm just doing it wrong.
I don't know.
So I'm here, it's online.
Okay, it's online already. Yes.
Then it brings me,
Yes, you're getting to that instance actually, yeah.
and then it brings me here.
Yeah.
And then I type in my information that I created.
Yeah. That's actually the email address you used for the registration, right?
Yeah. And then it says invalid.
That's the same email address you used to log into the center of mine. Okay, the password that you used was the one that was mailed to you, right? Because you received an email with the initial password after the instance was created. Check the inbox. But that's fine. There should be another email telling you that the instance was actually created. Yeah, here you go.
Okay.
That's the password. That's the initial one. Okay, once you use the initial password, you are asked to kind of set your own custom one. So that's just the initial one. Okay, so.
Do you have to register first?
On?
Do you have to register first? Register first.
Yeah, so you need to get started, you need to register. Register first. Go through the registration process. Make sure you provide a real email address as a confirmation that you sent it. Okay. Good, then I'll just send a quick message here. Okay, perfect. Good. So while your instances are set up, let me just go through some of the functional overview as discussed. First of all, why you should really care about corporate memory and what does corporate memory bring to you. And some of the benefits are actually listed here. So we identified 3 main benefits, so to speak, for the key audience that we have in mind for corporate memory. Right? And the 3 elements are, that's also the focus of today's masterclass, a significant reduction in the time that a knowledge graph enthusiast, a knowledge graph practitioner needs to put into the creation of an actual. Right? But that's also one of the main focus of corporate memory. Right? The second main benefit is that data products as such, right, also like in the data mesh idea proclaimed, this is something very important to many of the knowledge graph practitioners that we see out there. And our platform can be efficiently used to do data product management, data product creation, and also reuse and repurposing of elements that you put into your data product creation pipeline. And lastly, but we will not touch that too much in today's discussion, is that corporate memory can also effectively be used as a business knowledge editor. What do we mean by that? more and more customers actually express the demand that knowledge graph interaction should not only be possible for skilled knowledge graph practitioners, but also to a wider audience in their enterprises. And that is what we mean by business knowledge editor, right? So our application can unlock the capabilities of knowledge graph and knowledge elicitation, right, across the applications using a specific configuration of corporate memory. That is something that we enable and unlock as well. Okay. For a functional overview along these three elements, this page basically provides an overview of what is in the box of corporate memory, so to speak. Sorry for that. Very first step is, well, most likely the first step is the graph builder, right? So where we started, this is also the area we will be focusing on in the masterclass, where we will start with data ingestion, connection to files and databases if needed, where we perform dataset management, and ultimately where we use our mapping and linking capabilities to create symbolic rules that turn your non-graph data structures into graph data structures, right? Those individual elements, they can be pieced together in our workflow editor. All this is supported by graphical interaction means, which makes it available to a wider audience and unlocks these capabilities also towards your business users. Then also specifically targeted to the business user is the whole area of exploitation and exploration of the knowledge graph, which is typically a phase that comes after the knowledge graph has initially been created. In that area, we do come with a box full of standard UIs and interaction paradigms that can be used as they are, right? But we also do come with a very powerful ability to shape the way the data is entered and can be interacted on with the instance. That is something that we do, on top of the W3C standard shackle shapes, right? So you basically can come with your own set of shackle shapes in order to tailor the application to your specific needs. So more people joining the room, that's great. Just rewinding the slides for the latecomers. If you want to follow along the practical part of the session, I can encourage you to go to eccenca.my, register a personal account, and request your own personal sandbox. When you want to do so, make sure that when you request a sandbox, that you choose a name that starts with KGC minus. Right, so then the deployment of that instance will be prioritized in our systems. So you should then have it in a few seconds afterwards.
I did use KGC, so how to delete that? Create new one or?
What was the name? I can just inform the crew that they're populated anyway.
Xeniagraph dot.
Yeah. .eccenca.my.
Yes.
Basically. Okay. Okay. Give me a second.
Xenia is with Z.
Okay. So Zenial.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Good. That should be fine as well. At least I received an okay. Let's hope for the best. Yeah, business knowledge editor, as I said, right? So we basically come with many capabilities pre-configured, but we also come with the ability to largely reconfigure the application according to your needs, or specifically to the needs of your business users, right? Done so by the help of W3C shackle shapes, as said. Queries basically can be built in our visual query editor and also stored for later reuse and for parameterization. And different other means of interacting visually and kind of table and details page-wise with the data is available as well. And then largely towards this third pillar of data products management, we do have a pillar that we call consumption of the knowledge graph, which kind of contains, as you can see, different APIs and endpoint techniques in order to really make use of the data that we built into the knowledge graph. We also do come with special integration abilities into Redash, into Power BI, We do come with a Python interface layer that allows you to easily build your own custom Python applications on top of the graphs created with corporate memory. Okay. Specifically for that masterclass, I think I mentioned it already, we will focus on the graph building capabilities in the next few minutes. We see, and it's been reported from our practitioners in the field and also from clients, that there is a significant time reduction possible when using corporate memory to build and create your knowledge graphs via our paradigms. This masterclass will provide an overview and practical hands-on session for those with their own sandbox, but it's not considered a full conclusive training, as you can imagine, not possible in 90 minutes. If you're interested in full trainings or certifications, you can also check our learning management system and get registered there and then take courses, and even certifications in corporate memory. Okay. Question regarding the Xenial graph instance, would you be fine if this thing is being renamed? In terms of the prefixes put in front, no problem with that. Okay, just feedback that back to the group. Okay, just briefly, I mean, as this is kind of a SaaS service provided to you, you probably don't care too much about the architecture underneath. For those that would care about this, just this very brief overview. Corporate memory basically is the layer on top of a knowledge graph database, which we use to keep our own metadata and also instance data if you choose to populate this back into a triple store. And on top of the actual data sources or also data sinks in your infrastructure, that could be databases, that could be data APIs, REST APIs, files sitting locally or in a shared drive. This is where we put the data fabric on top. This is what corporate memory creates. And the typical user interaction goes through our CLI for automation means or for instance management means. And the typical user pattern goes through the web browser as such. Okay. Yes, please.
So that we can do real-time ingestion and batch or
Batch
supported?
Near real-time is supported. Batch processing is supported as well. Yes.
Near real-time, what does it mean? Like 10 seconds or?
In the end, that will be batch mode. Depends on the frequency you run these batches.
Okay.
How fast it can go, again, depends on the infrastructure provided. These sandboxes, I must admit, they run on very minimal system specifications. As you can imagine, we're providing them for free, so there is no big deal for us attached in these infrastructures. So they're still quite capable, so you can do also big data projects with those, but they will definitely not be able to produce a large or high frequency of messages coming in. Right? So if you have, I don't know, something 40 kilohertz of messages coming in every second, that's something you cannot process with that kind of infrastructure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you're totally free with the triple stores as long as they have some kind of Sparkle endpoint, or you have specific?
Good question. We kind of free as long as the triple stores adhere to SparkUL 1.1, including the graph store protocol, right? Which is not entirely true for many animals out there, right? So one example that we do not officially claim to be supported. Can I come up with the name? It was a document database. MarkLogic, I think, is the name. I think MarkLogic also comes with a Sparkle layer. They do fully comply with the standard, so this thing is something that can work underneath. We actually ship GraphDB as our suggested, as our OEM partner database, and this is part of the package as a default, so to speak. Right? So if our customers just buy a box of corporate memory, so to speak, they will receive a license of GraphDB as part of the package. Right? But other options do exist. Okay, has everyone that wants to follow along received an email with the credentials and the entry point? Please, for instance, not yet, but you registered for it. Okay. Then let's kind of put some more slides in front, but we are actually already at the doorsteps to interacting with the instance and do some practical work. The process that we will follow is looking like this. So we will start with activating, installing a vocabulary. That should be the foundation for the data fabric that we're going to populate with data. Then some internal structures need to be created. The knowledge graph creation process typically happens in what we call projects, right? So there's a number of projects that you can create. There's no limit to this number. So you can basically define how the data creation project should be structured. Everything that belongs together can go into a project. You can separate work between teams. You can separate work between people and so on and so on in your company if you need to. Then some internal structures, again, to connect to data is created. This is what we call data sets. So there are source kind of data sets that read data, and there are target kind of data sets that will be used to render the results of your data processes. Source data sets will be uploaded. We work with files here, and the target data sets in our case are knowledge graphs that we want to build named graphs effectively in the database. And then we actually get to the key elements of corporate memory. This is just preparatory work to that point, if you will. We will create the transformations, and we will create linking rules, and we will then patch them together to create our very first workflow that populate the knowledge graph from our underlying data. Okay. Let me know if everyone received an email. Still not yet? Okay. Let me see.
It was in my spam folder, just in case.
Okay, yeah, that's true, yeah. Thank you for that remark. So we just witnessed that emails could go into your spam. So please also
Still not, but
check
we
that.
can continue. I'll just.
Yeah. You catch up. We catch up later. So let me just check if I forgot anything that I wanted to mention. Yeah, maybe as a brief side note regarding the data sources. The underlying database that we need to use is a triple or quad store, as mentioned here. But on the data sources and data sync side, Neo4j is also supported by our infrastructure. Right? So one of the benefits building data rules or data product pipelines, if you will, with our infrastructure could, for instance, be that you populate the data with the very same pipeline towards your RDF triple store, as well as to the underlying to another different Neo4j database at the very same time. So you would not need to rewrite the data production rules. Linking rules could work in the very same way. The data mappings could work in the very same way. I think that's worth to be mentioned here. Okay. Good. Yeah, let's start our engine, so to speak. Let me just put that aside here. Maybe I just use this here as a quick placeholder. Okay. So everyone that received a login can now log into corporate memory. Just remove this here.
Status still pending.
Yeah, your state is still pending. Okay. Yeah, we start easy. No worries. Hopefully you can catch up, or the process will be able to catch up. Okay, my mouse pointer. Here we go. So once you logged into the infrastructure, the first thing that you see is kind of a welcome page to the sandbox. Here we provide some helpful resources of how the sandbox can be used. Right? So like a getting started page where the overall platform is introduced. The sandbox resources, so the sandbox doesn't come totally empty. There is a few things already activated and installed. Actually, there is a demo project that we will be rebuilding, or parts of that we will be rebuilding during this masterclass. So whatever is not achieved completely, or steps that we left out due to time constraints, this is something that you can then basically study yourself, just looking at that reference project. For the next steps in the masterclass, this link is important. So everyone that could already log in, please go to this page. This page lists, as the very first thing, lists a few resources, file resources, an Excel file, a CSV file, a JSON file, and a few more that we will be using. I would say let's try to start maybe with the first three, and let's see how far we can get during the masterclass. That would be my idea, that we work on the first 2 or 3 of these files. So please download the Excel, the CSV, and the JSON file as the next step. The vocabulary that we will be using, our products vocabulary is also attached here more or less for your information, as this vocabulary has already been installed into the corporate memory instance as part of the kind of bootstrap data package that I mentioned before. yeah, for those that want to understand and want to learn more, I think also some good resources here for further studying is here. So we have a rich library of tutorials and examples. Some of the important ones to get started with are linked here directly. The tutorials page itself provides the full overview of the tutorials that we have, and also the 3 elements: the creation of a knowledge graph project, the exploration or the business use or knowledge elicitation part, so to speak. All the data products management or consumption part is also specifically linked here, so you can find entry points into those. Yeah, for people interested into kind of how to automate, how to micro-batch things more or less automatically, the introduction to our corporate memory command line interface is also given here. And yeah, yet again, the link to the certification and training page for those interested to learn even more. Oh, okay. Good. As the majority of the class kind of progress to downloading the artifacts, ask that. And then we can move ahead. We're still waiting for the email. Okay. Okay. So very diverse states here. Okay. Let's see, but I don't read anything problematic from the back scenes, so should be coming, I guess. Good. I would say then let's get started. As I said, one of the first things that we need to be doing would be registration of the vocabulary. As said, in this instance, the vocabulary has already been installed. So if you go into the main menu of the application, which is in the burger menu in the top left, right, this will be basically automatically popping out, or you can also click this and then you can read the full menu. Our vocabularies catalog is linked. In the vocabulary catalog, you will find some of the usual suspects, so to speak, some basic vocabularies that we ship automatically, and that can be installed into that instance just by flipping the installation switch on the far right side. For the purpose of this masterclass, the product vocabulary has already been installed, provided. Graphics of it will be PV.
Quick question, is this usually just a clean slate? Like, if you were to create a sandbox instance on your own, would it just have nothing in there and then you build on top of it? Or is some of this already built in? You said the vocabulary was already added.
Yes, what you see here will be automatically populated into the sandboxes. But if you're not interested in any of these elements, you can get rid of it.
Okay.
Right? So if you really want to prune everything from the instance, just flip all the switches that you see here on the right side and go to projects. There is just one data project present at this time. You can just delete this, and then you really start with a very bare naked installation. You can do whatever you desire to do with this thing. Right. Yeah, we had this discussion internally, how kind of complete or incomplete should that kind of sandbox be provided to its users. We decided to start with a kind of minimal but still complete project that showcases some of the capabilities you can study and learn how things are done. All right. So the vocabulary installation step in that kind of masterclass can be skipped, so to speak. What I'll show you is nevertheless a short sneak peek into the vocabulary that we will be using. We will be integrating data from a product domain, if you will. Probably you could already tell from the data assets that you downloaded. So there is an abstract base class product, and there are 2 more concrete subclasses of this base class connected by these black arrows, which is hardware and service, which is kind of reflected in the files that you downloaded it. Then we also have a relationship, a supplier relationship to a supplier class, which belong or are located in a certain country. What else do we have? We have employees working in a product management role connecting to the product. We have a special subclass of an employee in form of a line manager, if you will. We have departments that have responsibility for products, and we have product categories. So very concise model for this demonstration here. And the next step now is basically to get really started with the actual build project. So I'm heading over to the build, going to the projects basically. And here the first thing I do is I create a new project. Need to decide for a title. Some ideas for namings are also provided on that page. So I'm not so super creative right now, so I'll just steal the name that was suggested here. KG product build demonstration. Sounds good to me. So in this dialog, the only thing that you need to provide really is a name for your project. Right, that's it. And now we have an empty working area, so to speak, to define our datasets, transformation, linking tasks, and workflows, and some of them we will be doing now in the next few minutes. Let me pause here.
Still, sandbox is not created.
We're still waiting for the sandbox. Okay, let me pause here. I'm asking backstage if I just rush through this.
Yeah,
Okay. Let me just understand if waiting makes sense.
Did you say pending?
Not pending.
Yeah. I had to go to my spam folder and the email.
I check the spam box, it's not there.
Okay.
We started with the KGC, right?
Yeah. With KGC dash. I've helped as much as I can.
Okay. I just learned that the boxes are still in creation. So let's see if they can give me a number of how many are pending. Okay, 10 are online, 3 need to go, 1 is currently deploying. Okay, so we should be, maybe we pause here for a second. And maybe while waiting, probably again an overview of the process, right? So as I said, the very first step is go to the vocabularies catalog and activate the few vocabularies that you want to use in your data build project, right? As I said, usual suspects are in here, like schema.org is here, FIBO is here, friend of a friend, GIST, the very basic vocabularies like RDF, OWL. It's all available in the catalog, and you always have the ability to just come with your very own vocabulary. There's an API for that if you want to automate that step, but you can also click the button to register your own turtle or OWL files and upload your very specific domain ontology. So that is how you populate this catalog. And then, as we said, as we want to build a knowledge graph from non-RDF sources, you need to create a project. That's how it would be looking like in a total bare installation, so to speak. We already have a project, so it looks a little different. So you either click this or the create button on top right, and then from the creation dialog, you choose project, you find a project name, and off you go. Yeah, as the next step, then we populate or connect our data, right? So in our scenario, we will be uploading CSV, Excel, XML, JSON files. You also have the ability to connect to Sparkle endpoints, to SQL endpoints. You can go via JDBC. Let me see if we can find that real quick. JSON, JDBC endpoint connection. So whatever sources are required basically can be connected here via this abstraction that we call the data set. In the different category, in the task category, there's also the ability to trigger a REST request. So if you need to go to a REST API to fetch your data or to push results back, that's also possible. But this thing cannot be found in the data set category, but in the tasks category. But also available via the search. So you can just search for REST and you will be quickly there.
What about GraphQL?
For GraphQL, we have a Python plugin. That's actually one of the things that you can do beyond the standard package. So we have a Python plugin SDK, and we already do have an open source Python plugin provided for GraphQL. So if you need to fetch data from a GraphQL interface, this is what you can do in that case. So yeah, then next, in our case, as the target for our data should be knowledge graphs. So the next step that we want to do then is to define the knowledge graph that should be holding our result data. And then we really get into building the data pipelines. Just a few impressions from this. Hopefully we all can get to that step in a few seconds. So this is basically the kind of, we call it mapping suggestion dialog. This is a dialog that really helps you to align your source data structures with the target vocabularies that you loaded into the instance. So it's not a direct mapping process, but a process that regards the actual underlying semantics of your target ontology. So in order to come out with a mapping result that gives you the best in return, so to speak, with the least effort that you need to put into. And on the right side, I think you can also see a very interesting, unique feature. Also, Peo again showcasing the thing that you liked very much yesterday with the preview in line, what's really happening to your data. So you can visually build data manipulation and creation pipelines as part of the data transformation process. And that's also what we mean by improving the speed and improving the turnaround time between IT and business. Because building such a data manipulation rule in such an accessible way, let's say, that really unlocks also discussions that you can have in a workshop between IT, between the domain experts, basically in one go, instead of having longer turnaround times and cycles between them. Okay. Just checking the chat here with the vaccine people. Let me see. Let me know if you received the emails. You got yours? You got yours as well? Yes. Okay.
No.
Not you. Okay. But everyone else? Yours is pending. Okay. Good. Then maybe 2 or 3 more slides. Okay, that was data transformation or mapping, if you want to call it like this. And yeah, that again is an impression, and you see the visual concepts are the very same, obviously. This impression of our linking capability and of our link learning capability, which is this is a very interesting one, because that process helps you to automatically build a linking rule from an interactive data labeling process, which is powered by an active machine learning algorithm that works behind the scenes. And yeah, that effectively lets a business user with no knowledge about how such complex rules need to be created and how these data manipulation operations need to be used, that these people build these rules nevertheless, right? Just by kind of indicating and labeling the data in an interactive way, indicating if certain data situations should be considered as a link should be established, yes, or no link should be established, decline, basically. So that is the process that happens there. Yeah, and then lastly, as soon as you build the data pipelines, you can, or the elements for your data pipelines, this is also a very interesting feature. You can stitch these together into higher order executables, if you will. We call that workflows, data workflows, which can again be combined into meta workflows. So this, for instance, is a workflow of workflows. And I think that's the first element of the right side screenshot is here on the left side. This data production workflow is shown here. So your data sources are tapped into, your transformations are applied, and the result of the data transformation is rendered into a target knowledge. Okay. Yeah, and then lastly, that's a sneak peek into our exploration interface. So the business user dissemination, so to speak. That is then something that you obviously can do afterwards. Once the data is populated into the knowledge graph, you can just go in here and consume the data that you just populated into your data integration project. Okay. So just looking at the pending 2 gentlemen here. Can you confirm? Not yet? Not yet either?
No.
Okay. Should be just 1 more to go. Okay, 1 more to go, I learned.
Only for time.
We have
Minutes to
50 minutes more. I think we need to take some shortcuts here, but we'll manage. Sure.
So when you're defining that pipeline and you're linking for
Check, check.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yes. Thank you. All right. Audio's back. Sorry for the remote participants. So for those that want to follow along, so what this IRI pattern is about, it contains static prefix or suffix parts, and it can contain one or multiple placeholders. Right? These placeholders are typically referring to columns or paths in your underlying data set. Right? We are working on top of an Excel file, so it will be columns mostly. I picked one of the column headers, which is product ID, which contains an ID, an identifier for the rows. So I can actually build an individual IRI for the hardware instance that we're gonna create from an ID value of a column that we specified here. And an example of such a result IRI is shown just below. Some more examples actually can also be revealed if you click that little handle here on the left side. So if you're fine with this, we can just save the basic setup for that instance. And then it's time basically to populate additional data for our hardware resource. And what we're going to do is here we use our mapping suggestion wizard to speed up the process. So that we just start this wizard, which will basically come out with this table here. Let me just expand this to see a bit better and more. On the left column, we see the source column of our underlying data file, right? So the product width, height, depth, the product's weight, the product name, the product ID, and so on and so forth. And in the target data column, we do see suggestions that are pulled up from the underlying ontologies in the system. Right? So that's, I think, one of the magic moments here when you really need to do data mapping projects, coming out with the real relationships between your data and the target ontology. This is, I think, one of the time-consuming steps, and this is something we try to speed up with this kind of a alignment process. And basically, all you need to do here now is kind of review the suggestions that the system pulled up. So width mapped to width a millimeter. This just looks fine to me. Price. One more interesting thing to note. The mapping type, I think, is also important. As you know, in graph, you have value map, you have object properties, and you have data type properties. So things that connect to leaves in your graph, right, and things that connect to other objects. And that is exactly also something that you can define and change if necessary in this dialog. So typically, the default that's coming out here is derived from the actual ontology. So the price property is defined as an object property. The supplier property is defined as an object property. Consequently, the suggested target mapping type is type object. And for others that are defined as a data type property, obviously the mapping type will be value or a leaf in the tree. So price is fine. So we want to potentially have multiple prices for our products. So that's why it's a complex object connecting to a price resource. Our supplier obviously is a resource in its own. So we have an object property here. The product manager is an employee, so another object relationship here, but also more properties, literal properties, so to speak, about the product, like the height, the ID, another resource connection, category, the depth, and the weight. So let's just go with these suggestions. And now, basically, with a few clicks, already a graph fragment has been populated. So we see our starting point is of instant hardware. And we also do see sub-resources connecting from that hardware to an employee in the role of the product manager, to a price, indicating one price in one specific currency for that product, connecting to its supplier, connecting to its product category, along with some data type properties like the weight, the height, the depth, the ID, and the name of this thing. Okay. And this rule now could already be executed, or if necessary, you actually can, what's going on here? Or you can actually also go into any of these sub-elements if needed and repeat that very same process. I'll just showcase one thing in price, which could be interesting. So you can not only do this process supported by the wizard, you can obviously also do this process manually. Let me just show it briefly once here on the price So if we are handling the price, for instance, we want to extract the amount as one of the criteria. Amount is a data type property in our vocabulary, and we want to extract the amount from the product's price. So let me save this. And I think this is a typical issue, so to speak, that you see from data coming in from the business side. Obviously, the source schema has not really been modeled according to database standards. So in this case, a value and a unit has been clubbed together in one column. So in a good database representation, obviously, if you want to hold the amount and the currency in separate properties. So that actually calls for what we call a complex transformation, which actually can be activated by using this little pen icon, which making you end up in this dialog that allows you to tap into your source paths. Mouse pointer gun. Here we are. So yet again, these are all the paths from our source file, and it allows you access to a library of data manipulation or transformation functions. So this library comes with over 200 of these functions sorted into different categories. So for those very literate in Excel, for instance, you can use the typical Excel functions to manipulate your data. You have combinatorial conversion functions, state manipulation functions, and many more. For our price, again, let's look at what's going on here. So we have the amount and the currency clubbed together. So what we could do here is, for instance, we just use a replace operation, search for EUR and replace it with nothing. Right? Try that. Yeah, doing its thing, right? So removing the trailing blank EUR. Now looking a little closer, this is a floating point value written in the typical European or German style of using a commata. So we want to have a technical representation. So let's just parse this as a float, considering the comma as the decimal point. And now with these two operations, we should be at what we would consider a proper technical representation of the amount of the price of this product.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you have functions to like parse like a list or something, if maybe you get multiple values?
Yeah. There are tokenization functions, there are index access functions, if you then want to access a certain element from that array.
So you can start with on the left, like one value, and then split it into multiple.
Yes.
Question, is it possible to create, how they call it, user-defined function, meaning I write some code, I put it there, I can use it, right?
Again, we are at the Python SDK thingy.
Okay.
All these options, operations, these boxes, they can also be coded in Python.
Okay.
Right, so the part of that SDK is the ability to implement your very own elements in that list and make it available to your business users. Right, so they do not need to write a line of code. They just pull up that operator that you installed as part of the Python plugin. You dropped again? Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, the camera is interfering. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Now we've written our first complex transformation rule. Right, so yeah, what should we do? Let me just look at the clock. So we have 30 minutes, should be fine. Are you still comfortable in following along, or did I lost every little soul in that room here? Okay, so. Okay, let's see. Let's do one more. We also populated the supplier, and I think with these two, then we can look at a linking rule demonstration also. That could be interesting, I hope. So let me just do one more transformation. So we have our TF for supplier. Okay, and in this case, we are using the supplier dataset as our source. Again, the rest can remain as is. Again, we start with defining the entry point for this transformation. So we're editing the target class here, searching for supplier. Oops. Supplier, there we go. And also manipulating the pattern for that. Supplier suggested pattern looks like this. So let me see. I think there should be something like a supplier ID. Yeah, this auto completion is super helpful also in XML and JSON documents, right? So if you do not really recall the hierarchical structure of the sources, having the ability to access them in this auto completion is super handy, right? So I now know that ID is one of the fields in my JSON schema. So let me use this in building an IRI for the supplier. You see, that looks just fine. And then yet again, let me try if the mapping suggestion comes out with something reasonable. Populating the supplier with data. So we have a city property in this. The address locality sounds appropriate. We have a country relationship. Well, we can try that. Interesting. I think I try something else first. So we have the country code and we populate it to the address country code. That sounds good. We use the ID. That is fine. And let me just check the supplier. What do we have here? Yeah, that looks like a supplier name. Perfect. So we assign this to the name property. Okay. Good. I missed an H here. Yeah, this looks good now. So we have an initial mapping for the suppliers. One more thing. To make your data fall into place, we do have a supplier relationship on our hardware mapping already, but we didn't explicitly specify the IRI to be created when we read the hardware. So I'm just stealing this little snippet here. So in order that the results in your knowledge graph will fall into place, we go back to the hardware transformation and to the supplier subpart. And here we manipulate the URI pattern for the supplier and use the supplier ID to generate the link to the respective node in the knowledge graph, right? So we just make sure that the same IRI is used. Let me see, I think there should be, yeah, that's, I think, also an interesting feature we can briefly discuss. Reusing the same IRI minting rules is important in many mapping projects, right? Because creating the same IRIs for similar means is one way of putting your data or connecting your data in a knowledge graph, as you know, right? And this kind of library is automatically populated from every IRI that is defined in the application and across the application. So whenever you need to link to the same thing, instead of reminding what you've used as the URI pattern before, you can just pick and choose one of the previously used patterns from that library, right? So in our case, we're good with this. And I would say, yeah, we have 25 minutes, that's fine. So let's put together a first knowledge graph by assembling these two transformations into an overall workflow. New concept. So we have not created a workflow yet. So let's do this. Create a new workflow. And in this workflow, basically now we assemble the pipelines. So we have a transformation for hardware and supplier, and we read the data from our hardware products. This is the Excel file. This is the input for this transformation. We have the supplier JSON file, which is the input for this other transformation. And we have two knowledge graphs, which should be the receiving side. So we have the hardware knowledge graph. Connect this. And we have the supplier knowledge graph. We connect this as well. Let me save this. Let me run it. So we see, okay, already done. So we have 5,000 entities created in hardware, and we have 250 entities created in supplier. Okay, sounds good.
Question.
Yes.
Runtime environments, right? We are running this, but if I say, I don't know, one is a very fast real-time source, or can we control the infrastructure environment, how this is executed, or no?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I can tune it, right?
You can, exactly. So what would trigger such a pipeline? I did that now manually, right? So I clicked the run button and this thing went through. what else can you do? You can set up a scheduler and run that thing basically on a time-based interval, every day, every hour, every minute, whatever you need, right? Or you can use our APIs or our command line utility. So if you, for instance, want to do that event-based, you can set up an event monitoring thing and then use the command line tool to just send off this one-liner, basically running the pipeline. That would be.
So can you?
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, but can I repeat the execution runtime environment, or that's black box for me?
Okay, now I know what you mean. No, the run, this is currently executed on the machine or the environment that is holding our data integration component. Right, so you can obviously size that infrastructure independent from all the other technical components we ship. But then in the end, it's a black box. So all the execution happens on that machine, so you cannot offload that somewhere else.
So I cannot tweak the workflow. I have 50 workflows running same time. I cannot say I have environment this much, but this workflow should get 80% of the resources, something like that. I'm just
No.
how to optimize the runtime environment in production, because sometimes, something is more important and some things can fail.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, how the reaction on failure should be, this is something you can configure. So either you stop the execution on the failure, or you consider failures to be kind of okay and proceed. This is something you can configure. And what you also can configure, I think I showed that in one of my screenshots. So if you need to have a specific execution order, you can actually achieve that by this workflow thingy, right? So if you have designed individual workflows like we just did, and you need to run that before the second, before the third, then you just do something like this, right? Which then defines an execution order along the workflows, right? Others might be decoupled from this specific order of execution, right? They could run parallel to that pipeline, or before or after. But that's something how you can manipulate. But the execution environment itself will always be the machine where this corporate memory component is installed.
Okay.
And also the other question was, can I dedicate a certain capacity of resources to each of these workflows individually? The answer is no, this cannot be done right now. Yes.
So if I've already pulled in all my data and then I have like one new record, can I push an individual record or a new data set on top of the existing one?
Yes. Yeah. That's something you can do. You probably remember this this switch of clearing the graph before execution. This is something, for instance, if you turn that off, every time the pipeline runs, new data will be populated on top of the existing one. That is one thing. And what you also can always do is, if you populate towards a named graph, you can use update statements, or you can generate update statements and run them on top of the existing data. You need to do that, yeah.
Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
Usually you have pipelines, right? You need some kind of scheduler or workflow tool, because I can say run this, but wait until this is done. And so do we do that in tool, or I heard the API, so we can use any other orchestration tool?
We do two things in that scenario. So either we design a specific explicit execution order, like shown here, right? So that this first, then this, then this. That's one option. The other option is we do this kind of orchestration in a script, and then using our CLI, which then simply runs the workflows or the other elements in the correct sequence.
Or I can use any orchestration tool, because
Exactly.
APIs and trigger.
Our CLI in the end talks to our REST APIs.
Yeah.
So you can talk to the exact same APIs in whatever means you desire. Okay, but let's briefly check the results, right? So we populated 2 knowledge graphs. So let's see what we have here. KGC, I think I named them. So what I did, I was just going back to our knowledge graph, to our exploration interface and the knowledge graph module in here. And here we have now access to all the named graphs in the system. And we see, so if we go to all graphs and we search for KGC, we should see 2 with that KGC in front. Yeah, we have a hardware and a supplier graph now. Okay, cool. That's what we expected. And our hardware graph contains several hardware resources. Our supplier graph contains several supplier resources. Okay, looks not so bad. So first results already achieved. What we could do now is, interesting thing to note here. So we're looking here, what is this interface about? So we are actually looking into the underlying triple store now, right? So we're looking at all the named graphs that do exist in the triple store. This is the graph dialog here on top. right? So this is a named graph, this is another named graph. And for each of the selected named graphs in the navigation box, we're looking at the classes for which instances do exist in the respective named graph. That is what you see here in front of yourself. And the navigation on the right, as you see here, there are some resources which are links, so you can click these links and then follow on to the price of that resource. So we have a hardware resource here. So if you go, no, it's the other way around. It's already linked. So if you go here, for instance, you have a price for that hardware resource. You can look at the price. We can go back to that very same hardware and see the price here also. Interestingly, we have a link to a supplier, right? So if I try to click this, I'm not seeing much of that supplier because the actual supplier resource itself lives in a different named graph outside of the scope of the graph that I'm currently exploring. And for this concept of keeping data separated into individual named graphs, we introduced a concept that we call integration graph, which is simply using an OWL import statement to link to other named graphs, build a graph hierarchy in the end, right? So let me just demonstrate this briefly. So if we create a new graph, again, I have a label prepared for this, exactly the KGC prod integration. Okay, that's fine. Let me set up this graph. Okay, I'm good with this. And now for this graph, here we go, just my integration graph. And now for that integration graph, let me set up my imports. So this graph now should be importing our hardware, KGC hardware, as well as our supplier, KGC supplier, and maybe also our product vocabulary. Product vocabulary, where it is. Here we go. So let me save this, just reload this view. Okay, so if you go into this thing, and now bringing up a product, first of all, you notice we're not looking at the hardware only, we're looking at the full class hierarchy imposed by the vocabulary, right? So we only know that hardware is a top class or parent class of hardware and service is because we integrated the vocabulary also, where this class hierarchy has been defined. Right, so this is, as you can see here, it's used to render the navigation hierarchy or the class hierarchy in your data. And now we should be able, if we look at any of these hardware resources, and we want to look at any of its suppliers, we now see the details of that supplier because we kind of broadened the scope of the graph that we're now exploring by importing as many other subgraphs as we need to. Right? Benefit, sorry, yeah.
Does it copy the data into
No,
or
no. It's just what we do is just an import statement.
Okay.
And what's internally happening is we expand the Sparkle queries, exploring the data with additional from name clauses. Right?
Yeah.
So disclosure is resolved by injecting the from names things. And why is this important and interesting? Because our graph permissioning, our access control rules that we can apply, work on top of named graphs. So along that hierarchy, some certain subgraphs can be disallowed for reading or writing for a certain group of people, but everyone is basically given the entry point of the top graph to see the full integration graph that you want to expose.
That means if I don't have access to the supplier information, I would not be able to see the hardware.
Exactly.
But if I click on supplier, I don't get
Exactly.
it.
You're again in the dead end that I've showed you in the first place. You still see that there is a link on hardware pointing to a certain supplier, but you could not pull up its details like I just did. Okay, so what's left? We have 15 more minutes. Let's look into linking, because I think that's also a very important aspect. We currently linked hardware and supplier already by using the same IRIs, but in certain scenarios, you cannot just come up with the same IRI creation rules, right? Because the data that you need to generate an IRI is potentially not available, or for some other reasons. And this is where linking comes in. So let's just create a sample linking rule. So let's see what we want to do. Yeah, okay, let's start with an interesting one. Let's start with an example how a customer of ours is using this, again, together with some domain experts. They are building rules to identify or to encode certain expert knowledge. Right? So they created a library of linking rules, over 1,000 of these linking rules, to assemble product details knowledge, right? Rules that tell them when certain parts are compatible to each other, when certain products can be bundled with other ones. And rules like this can then easily be modeled in our interface. So let's say we want to have a linking rule, okay, for similar products. And in this case, we want to check on our hardware. And we want to link to hardware itself. It is perform this linking rule on two hardware resources from our hardware graph. And let's say we want to see that we are looking into the same category. We didn't manipulate the category label. Let's see what we can do. We want to make sure that the product ID 1 and the product ID 2 is not the same. So we want to make sure that the product ID is unequal from each other, right? And at the same time, we're looking for some other product traits that need to be compared. So for instance, we could check that, if there is any of that. Let's say that we want to have product of the same weight, but obviously not the same product compared to itself. So that's what this ID inequality is making sure. But then let's say we have weight of product 1 and weight of product 2. And again, we want to check that in this case, it's equal to each other. So it's just two rules here. And then in the end, we just want to combine them and want to make sure that both actually are holding true. So ID should not be the same. And weight needs to be the same. Let's see if that actually yields anything. Okay, we have some, right? So we have some different products. So it's A166. It's not the same like A739. And we do see that both have a weight of 2 grams, whatever it might be, a condensator or something like that, right? So, and in this case, we could say that this is a PV, I don't know, similar product. That's probably the link that we want to put in between. So that's one way of building a linking rule, right? Oh, yeah, thank you. It's not similar. Thank you. Yeah, sure. So that's basically a very first linking rule built by hand. And I think, yeah, imagining with that preview, you can always see what kind of data is coming in. You see all the data manipulation steps you see and can understand all the comparison steps that are happening. So you always have very fine control about when and where a certain additional relationship will be established in your knowledge graph. Right, and that, as you can see, or as you've seen, the link that we established and that we put in between, this is something arbitrary. You can just choose any of the properties defined in your vocabulary. So let me save that. And yeah, then afterwards, you have one more element that you could patch into the workflow, right? So we have our data manipulation workflow. Right now, it's only doing this here. And now we could basically put the linking rule on top of that. Sourcing from hardware and writing the results again into the hardware graph maybe. So we could save this, run it. Okay, any links created?
Question, why 2 arrows on that box?
Very good question. Linking works on comparing the source element and the target element.
Okay.
Right, so you want to establish a connection from A to B, right? We always connect from source to target, with a directed graph, right? And in our case, we are picking 2 hardware resources and comparing them, right? Making sure it's not the same ID, not the same element. But likewise, the target could be coming from a different graph, from another different data set.
And if I have more than two, then I can chain it, or?
Yes, you would chain one link rule after the other link rule. Okay, so let's just inspect this thing briefly. So we created a link between our products. Compatible product, similar product, I think it was called. Oh, it's not coming, interesting.
There's a NK first, right?
Yeah. I'm looking at the wrong integration graph actually. KGC, thank you. You need to look into this one. Thanks. That was the reference project. Here you see it already. So now we have similar products, and you see, okay, now we have additional connections established in the graph by just adding a linking rule to it. A manually built linking rule. And I think 7 more minutes to go. That's good. So another interesting feature is the learning. And I think we can try the learning on top of the suppliers, because there should be a knowledge graph loaded here as part of the package, which contains countries. Let's see that. Here, the DBpedia World Fact Book contains a list of countries. So let me just copy this graph IRI here, and make it available in my project. I have another data set that I want to consider in a linking. So another knowledge graph, World Fact Book. Graph is this one. In that case, it's a source element. I don't want to override it. Come on, graph is not accepted. So, which will now be used in the linking rule. Supplier to countries, let's say that way. Now I think you will see why we can choose two different things. So our suppliers do sit in the supplier graph, right? And actually we want to update the caches here. And our targets will be coming from the World Factbook graph, right? Insert this here and update caches. Reference entity caches. Interesting. I can specify this manually. Okay, now on the supplier, let's see if it works. Sure. So the idea would be now to come up with a linking rule by learning. I think the failing caches they're not into my cards here. Okay, let me see if I have another instance where I can quickly demonstrate this thing. Yeah, I think we can use this here. Okay, we just clone that rule, link to supplier, that's fine. It's the very same thing that I wanted to do. Just remove that. So you've seen how a rule can be built manually, but what we want to use now is basically our learning approach. Let me reset that learning. And in learning, it's a two-step approach. In the first step, you are asked to indicate which candidate properties should be considered when learning a linking rule. Right. Again, you see samples from the data set. On the source side, you remember we have the suppliers. On the target side, we have the DBpedia countries. Right? That's what has been configured. I don't need the right side anymore, so let me increase this here. So then you see there is certain overlap in diverse properties, right? So you have the address country code, as we called it, on the left side, and the P297 from DBpedia, which is the ISO 2 country code. So that makes good one, I guess. Probably the only one really necessary, but we'll try something more. So here we have address country and the conventional long name, as they call it. Also, you see from the examples here, there is some overlap. Russian Federation, Central African Republic could make an interesting linking candidate as well. And then still we have here address country and official language name, so to speak. Maybe let's consider that as well. So we have 3 properties for considering. We probably don't really sure which one is the right one. So with these 3 as candidates, let's start the linking process. And this is now an interactive data labeling that's happening here. So you see that, again, an example from our sources, which is the suppliers, and from the target side, which is the countries, is shown side by side. And you see that the 3 elements that we selected in the previous step are now shown with the respective values. And the color coding helps you to make your labeling decision. And now you need to indicate if this supplier sits in this country. That's what a link type says. That's the relation we want to establish. We want to link the country, the supplier resource to the country resource. And now basically on this data, can you confirm that this supplier should be linked to that country, right? On the supplier side, we know the country code, we know the name, Central African Republic, CF, looks pretty good. In this case, we can confirm. Same scenario here, TV, Russia is good. Now it goes into a different direction, right? Testing some other overlap that we potentially have. Official languages spoken in the country of Swiss, there is German. Germany, there is some overlap down here, also indicated by the color coding, but you see Switzerland, Germany obviously doesn't overlap. So in this case, we need to decline. That is not a good constellation. And here below you already see a rule has been generated already, tapping into the address country and the conventional long name at this point in time. Now with more feedback that you give, the rule will be refined in every step and will become better and better. And what we're actually creating is an interactive gold standard, so to speak, which currently consists of 5 reference elements. Right? And based on these 5 elements, that linking rule has been calculated. So it's the best fitting rule according to these 5 resources in the gold standard. So you can imagine, I think how many countries are in the world, 250 something, right? So 5, it's not a good coverage yet. So let's maybe increase that number to something like 10 or 20, and let's see what kind of rule comes out of this. So AR is good. It's not a good one. Not a good one. Not a good one. So let's maybe do one more and then check the rules. So what do we have now? We have address country code, and compared to the ISO 2 country code coming in from DBpedia. So I think God's feeling would already have told you, or the data expert, then obviously only looking at the ISO 2 country code as this is present in both sides. It's probably the only reasonable linking rule that you want to have. But even without knowing that this is the result that you should aim for, just by interactively labeling your data and going through the linking process, it turns out that this rule is automatically generated for you. Right. So at the end of this thing, you can just save that rule, accept this. And this now basically transfers that learned rule back onto the canvas. So now the knowledge graph experts could come back in here and manipulate the things that are suggested here. So maybe he thinks that the Jaccard coefficient should allow some more leeway. I don't know, maybe if he could put something here and reevaluate. He also learns that the F measure of his change now dropped, right? So we are now at, I don't know, only 30% precision. Recall is still the same, but yeah, we created lots of false positives in that case. So he also knows that based on the gold standard that his colleague generated, the change that he did was not really effective. So let's go back to 0.8, and you're also back at 100% F measure for the rule. So you also know that, yeah, what kind of quality your changes due to the data. Okay. Landed on time, I would say. Opening up to questions. I think we have a little bit time before the next session, so if any questions are in the room, happy to answer them. Yes, sure.
So if you want to update records instead of adding new records,
yeah.
Do you create a separate workflow, or can you recycle the ones that you already have for create?
What would your change look like?
So
you need to change any of the rules, basically.
let's say, I'm using one of my columns to create a link further down the pipeline, and that column changes.
I think it would depend on the actual change that needs to be considered there. Either you need to regenerate the whole thing, or you do an update process really only focusing on the very change that needs to happen to that one property coming in from that.
So the intent isn't to have my sources be live data. That wouldn't really work well here.
Oh, it could. Good point. So if you're coming in with a database connection, right, so where constant data changes are happening, this thing here, I think you can imagine how this link tool could be added to the overall workflow. That's probably not so super interesting. So in the tutorials, there is, for instance, one example, like loading JDBC data set incrementally. But so if you have an ever-changing data source, like another database or data warehouse somewhere, you actually want to set up an incremental process. Right? So you will not want to go through all your 2 billion records in that JDBC thing every time you trigger that pipeline. Right, so here you have the option to either go via an index, so maybe you have an auto increment column, so you basically record the last index that you processed, or you go time based, so you keep track when was the last execution of your workflow, and then you basically continue from there. So that's the basic concepts, the two basic concepts outlined in the tutorial. Okay. Yeah. Other questions? If not, we are just next door to the exit or entrance. So happy to take your questions or discussions also afterwards, if you like. Yeah, and if not, we would be really happy if you really consider this tool as part of your tool chain for doing any kind of data integration, knowledge graph production projects, as discussed in the beginning of this talk. And yeah, maybe you liked what Corporate Memory can bring to your tool chain. Thank you very much. Sorry for this.
The right point, you know what is there, HD is there. They can funding there.